Imagine you're crouched in absolute silence, buried under a pile of leaves, your breath shallow, your heart pounding. Just a few feet away, a pack of saber-toothed cats prowls, their eyes scanning for movement. You haven't eaten in days. Your tribe is starving, and the only way to survive is to do something so unthinkable, so primal, that modern society would never forgive it. But for your ancestors, survival wasn't about rules. It was about raw instinct. What did they really do to make it through the darkest, coldest, most brutal chapters of human history? The truth is far more disturbing and fascinating than you've ever imagined. Picture waking up to the sound of howling wind. You're curled beside your family inside a damp, smoke-filled cave. The fire's long gone out. Your stomach growls so loud it echoes. You haven't eaten in 2 days. Outside, snow covers the earth like a graveyard blanket, and there's no guarantee anything edible still walks out there. The mammoths have moved south. The berries are frozen solid. Even the rodents are gone. You look at your father, who once brought back bison for the entire tribe. Now he can barely stand. The younger children cry, weak from hunger. And then someone suggests something horrifying. That's the kind of situation your ancestors faced, not once, but repeatedly, through ice ages, droughts, disease, and predator attacks. Their world was a game of survival, where hesitation meant death. Morality? It didn't exist the way we understand it today. When survival hung by a thread, decisions were made not by ethics, but by desperation. People didn't ask, "Is this right?" They asked, "Will this keep us alive one more night?" Let's talk about scavenging. Today, most of us wouldn't dream of eating meat that's been sitting out for days, bloated and crawling with flies. But early humans had no choice. If they came across a half-eaten carcass left by a saber-toothed cat or a dire wolf, they took it. They ripped into the remaining flesh before the other scavengers could arrive. Rotten meat meant survival. In some cases, they cracked the bones just to suck out the marrow, one of the richest sources of fat and energy available at the time. And then there was blood. Drinking animal blood wasn't taboo, it was smart. Warm blood was full of salt, iron, and nutrients their bodies craved. It was like prehistoric Gatorade. Even the Maasai of East Africa continued this tradition well into modern times, using cow's blood as nourishment during times of drought. For your ancestors, it wasn't gross, it was life. But there were moments when even scavenging and drinking blood weren't enough. Imagine a brutal winter that drags on for months. The snow never melts, the rivers freeze, and every hunt ends in failure. You return to camp empty-handed again. The children's ribs are showing, and the old ones, they've stopped speaking altogether. Then one morning, someone doesn't wake up, and just like that, the unthinkable becomes the only option left on the table. Yes, cannibalism, the ultimate taboo today, but back then, it was a horrifying, but sometimes necessary act of survival. This isn't speculation. Archaeologists have found prehistoric bones with clear signs of butchering. Cut marks, cracked skulls, burned remains. These weren't violent murders. These were moments of unbearable hunger. People consuming the flesh of their own tribe members who had already died, sometimes from exposure, sometimes from starvation, because there was simply no other way to keep going. It wasn't done lightly. It came with guilt, with shame, but also with something stronger than both, the will to protect the living. Sometimes the meat from one lost life meant a mother could feed her children for another week. It wasn't savagery. It was sacrifice. And this wasn't just an isolated event. From Europe to the Americas, from ancient Neanderthals to early Homo sapiens, the same patterns show up across time and continents. Some tribes even built rituals around it, trying to make sense of the horror. Others refused to speak of it at all, burying the memory in silence. But the truth remained. Those who were willing to cross that final line, to do what had to be done, were the ones who kept the tribe alive. It's chilling to think about now, but for your ancestors, it was a raw and brutal reality. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about endurance, about choosing life, even when every instinct screamed in protest. And that instinct, that desperate fire to survive at all costs, is still inside you, even if the modern world has done everything it can to bury it. Now imagine walking away from that cave years later, older, hardened, haunted. The snow has melted. The animals have returned. But something in you has changed. You've seen what survival really costs. And yet, here you are, alive, breathing. Because you did what others couldn't. You endured. But it wasn't just about what your ancestors ate or how far they were willing to go. It was how they adapted, how they learned to turn desperation into innovation. They began drying meat over fire to make it last through weeks of scarcity. They figured out how to store marrow inside bones and bury it underground like prehistoric rations. They started working together in tighter, smarter ways, sharing food, not just out of kindness, but strategy. Because one strong member didn't matter if the tribe failed. Survival was always collective. And they passed these brutal lessons on, generation after generation, through story, symbol, and scar. Children learned early. The world didn't care about your comfort, only your courage. And those lessons, though buried deep under thousands of years of civilization, still live in your DNA. That eerie feeling you get when you're in total darkness, that's your ancient warning system. The way your pulse spikes when you're starving or scared. That's a survival engine built by people who crawled through hell and came out stronger. We like to believe we're far removed from them, that we're smarter, cleaner, more civilized. But the truth is, we're just them, with better clothes and more distractions. Strip away the electricity, the grocery stores, the laws, and you'd meet them again inside yourself. The part that fights, claws, and does what it takes when there's no other option left. Your ancestors didn't survive by being noble. They survived by being relentless. They endured nightmares we can barely comprehend, and they did it for one reason, so you could be here, alive, comfortable, watching this, with food in your fridge and heat at the touch of a button. But don't forget ... the blood that runs through your veins. It belongs to people who once did the unthinkable, and they survived because of it. So the next time you feel overwhelmed by modern problems, remember this: your very existence is proof that someone before you faced something far worse and refused to give up. They didn't have technology, medicine, or comfort. All they had was willpower, grit, the brutal instinct to survive no matter the cost. They made impossible choices so their bloodline could continue, so you could live. You are the product of survivors. Not the strongest, not the smartest, but the most relentless. The ones who stared into the jaws of death and kept walking, who endured cold, starvation, and silence without ever being certain they'd see another sunrise. But they did, and because of that, here you are. So take a moment to honor that. Not with shame, not with fear, but with awe. Because survival isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's raw. Sometimes it's unthinkable. But it's real. And it's yours. If this story gave you chills, if it made you see your past, and maybe even yourself in a new light, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe for more powerful journeys into the forgotten parts of human history. And tell us in the comments, what would you be willing to do if everything was on the line? Your ancestors already answered that question. Now it's your turn.